Lord Mayor of Liverpool? Well, the Lord Mayor of Liverpool is known as the first citizen and chosen representative of the city, acting as a focal point for the community as well as promoting the city and forging national and international links. The Lord Mayor of Liverpool is always serving councillor, elected by full city council. We have the Lord Mayor of Liverpool, Councillor Anna Rothery. Welcome to your Manchester Extra, Councillor Anna Rothery.
Hello there, Caroline. Lovely to join you.
Tell us about the young Anna growing up.
The young Anna growing up, oh gosh, I don't know if I can remember that far back, but I'll try. Well, I didn't have the easiest of starts in life, actually. I had a debilitating illness, which was epilepsy, and it was quite severe. And so my start in life wasn't great. I used to be schooled at a special needs school. But, you know, my illness in comparison to some of the children I schooled with was not really that serious. I schooled with children who had polio, you know, because it was like the 60s, the mid to late 60s, and polio was still a very, very strong part of our life back then. And then also children who had terminal cancer, respiratory diseases, asthma, you know, things like that. And so I was schooled with children who were really, really going through personal challenges and really struggling. And so, you know, but on the plus side, it gave me a great insight and a great understanding about empathy and understanding the needs of others. I used to wing the children. Some of the children didn't have the confidence to, you know, to speak up and be heard or to stand up for themselves. And, you know, we were children. And so, you know, the boys still used to pull the hair of the girls like all naughty boys used to do. But, you know, the difference being as many of the girls used to wear wigs because they'd been through cancer treatment, etc. And so being a little bit of a tomboy as I was, I used to not think twice about giving them a little thump and telling them to behave. So that's where my real sense of injustice and standing up, you know, for people with little voices who can't really speak out for themselves came from.
Who was the influence in your family that encouraged you going forward?
It was definitely my mother. My mother was widowed quite young. She had 4 children to raise. And so, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And so she had to be quite inventive in terms of how she would move forward. She wanted to be a taxi driver. And basically what happened was that she harassed them, basically, until they gave in. And so she was finally given a job as a taxi driver. And I believe she was the first woman taxi driver in Liverpool. And so,
that's fantastic.
So that was a great gain for women. You know, outside of her work in life, she was a huge community activist as well. And so she took on the slum landlords in the early 70s over the substandard housing that many of us lived in. I mean, anyone of my age will remember we used to live in big houses and rooms. You know, it's almost as though the country is going back to the same way of housing in terms of houses of multiple occupation. They were the original houses of multiple occupation, and they were quite dire. And so she spoke up. She went to meet with the landlord. She went on Granada reports, and she talked about the abysmal state of the housing and how people were forced to live. She was really active in terms of, our unions. She was a trade unionist. And so I used to get dragged around, to various marches, etc. And also with the Stanley House Youth Club, they had a young, union membership. And they used to take us off on the marches for the miners and the dockers and, the Shrewsbury too. And, you probably wouldn't get away with it these days. But as young kids, we used to put the mounds of bread, for the marches when they finished the march.
Oh, yeah.
And, and disappear, behind all the bread, which was then served with the pots of soup that were made by the women. And that's the way things were done back then.
We're going through an unprecedented time. The world may be changing, but we are coming through this. We are your Manchester. We're Manchester's #1 chat show, and our chosen topic is always you. We specialise in a unique form of sponsorship and advertising that brings your brand to the forefront of conversation, both in Manchester and its surrounding areas. Your Manchester is returning, so get involved, become a sponsor or an advertising partner. We are coming through this. We are your Manchester. We're going through an
I was going to say, how did you get into politics? But it's a natural step, to be fair.
Yeah, I think, before I'd been active in community politics because I'd worked on a number of government initiatives. I managed, the first community not-for-profit contract on Action Team for Jobs. I managed the Jobs Education and Training Programme. I was chair of Granby Toxteth Partnership, which was the body that worked with Objective One funding. I also I delivered the first trainee social entrepreneurs programme in the country under the Lord Scarman programme. But I came very, very disillusioned, because although in theory these were great initiatives to bring people into education and to lift people out of poverty and to also ensure that, there was employment at the end of it, what I was really frustrated about is that these initiatives failed time and time again. And so that was when I decided I wanted to go into politics because I wanted to change the narrative about these initiatives and I wanted to be part of the decision-making process. And also, at that time, there was a lack of representation of women of colour. And so that was another reason why I wanted to go into politics. So I stood for Princes Park, which is a great honour because it's my community where I was raised. And so I stood for Princes Park in 2006, and I've been the Labour councillor there ever since. And so it's great to be able to work in your own community.
The catalogue of things that you've said, which ones were you most proud of?
I've got a great sense of pride in terms of representing my community. And to be able to sustain that over a long period of time, I've been able to do that because I can go back into the fold of my community, because it hasn't been easy. For the first 6 years, I was the only black councillor in Liverpool City Labour Party in Liverpool City Council. And it was a very lonely place, to be quite honest with you. But I used to gain my energy and recharge my batteries by going back into my community all the time. And a real sense of, I grew up with not an apathy, but a realistic outlook on life. And I looked around me and I thought, well, where are the opportunities for me? Am I going to get an education? Am I going to get a good job? And so, whenever I felt like I was flagging a little bit, I'd go back into the fold and, listen to, the issues that people would talk about and listen to the aspirations. And that was one of the things that I'm really proud of, that I was able to keep that focus. And, I think I'm also proud of the fact that, I'm a working class woman. I come from the people that I represent. I live and breathe it. It doesn't feel like a job or a chore. All these years later, I still enjoy representing my community.
I'm a 50-50 ambassador. And I have to ask you this question. What would you say to a young woman thinking about going into politics?
Do it. Don't waver on it. Do it. I've spent a lot of time with young people demystifying politics because, for me, that was a challenge. I thought, although I wanted to do it, I thought, politics isn't for people like me. And so, to a young Anna, I'd say politics is for people like you.
And I've got a question. What would you say to an 18-year-old Anna?
Do you know what? At 18, I'd gone into my first employment from when I left school, and I'd had such a harsh experience. It was my first sort of introduction to institutional racism. I'd gone to work in a local, one of the big retailers, and I was on a food counter. I used to work on the food counter, and I used to sell, all kinds of cooked meats and cheese, etc. and a woman had come in to buy some shopping, and she'd ordered 2 ounces of cheese. So I went to, I mean, we used to cut it with a wire back then. And so I went to cut the cheese with a wire. And then the next thing, this woman had, gave out an unmerciful scream. I thought she was dying. And everybody ran to her. And when the manager got to him, and he was like, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" She went, "I don't want anybody with black hands cutting my cheese." And, for me, at that tender age, because, I'd grown up in, I suppose, a bit of a vacuum in a predominantly black community, very mixed, diverse, Muslim, Somali, Malay and Chinese. And so it never ever been an issue for me prior to that. But that was my first experience of, systemic racism.
How did you come back from that?
I came back fighting, actually. I came back fighting because what happened is the manager moved me off the food and put me on shoes with this not so nice woman who was notorious for not being nice to the younger members of staff. And, so I went to the manager and I said, "Well, I think this is very unfair. I said, I haven't done anything wrong. And, you moved me from my job to another job." And it didn't go down very well. I can assure you it didn't go down well at all. But I had this inherent feeling that, it was injustice and I had to stand up for myself and for other people, really.
I think this is where we agree and get on with, with things like that. You basically have to stand up and call it out.
And you have to. And it can be quite a scary place when you choose to challenge. And it can make you very unpopular. But, the reality is you have to stay true to your principles and, and stand your ground. And, and don't just think about you as an individual. I always, when things get difficult for me, I move my focus away from myself and I think about our little sisters coming through, who we're going to, you're removing the barriers for our little sisters when they come through. And so that's how I sort of stay the pace, shall we say, in terms of making sure that I don't back down on the issues.
Talking about our little sisters, our little nieces and daughters and little sisters coming up. So the Baton Awards are celebrating Black, Asian, minority, ethnic women who are doing some amazing things. So women of racial groups from past, present and future. And what they are doing is passing the baton down, encouraging and empowering our young sisters coming forward. And this leads me on nicely to you winning the Baton Award, passing the baton down.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the Baton Awards.
Well, I was really surprised with the Baton Awards because I literally got an email saying, you've been nominated for the Baton Awards. And although I'd heard about them previously, it was a national thing, so it was London based. And I've always championed the Northwest and Liverpool, and made sure, make sure that we have our, our platform as well, as well as the and so I was really surprised when the information came through. And so I was invited down to London, and the Baton Awards is done through the House of Lords. And I won an award for being the most promising, I should say, Black politician, female politician. And you know what? It was so emotional because, we don't do what we do for recognition. We really don't. It was a big thing. It was a really big thing for me because, you just keep going and you keep going. And we do that for our own reasons.
And the pandemic saw you delivering food during lockdown. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, actually, it was prior to the pandemic. It was when the changes in universal credit came about. My community that I represent were really struggling in terms of the universal credit, and it impacted massively on families. Even families in work, families out of work, and families in work as well on low incomes. And so we set up the Hungry Must Be Fed, firstly in response to universal credit. We launched it thinking that we'd get a couple of family members coming along, and we ended up feeding 80 people on the launch. And so we continued to feed people, and those numbers grew and grew. And then the next thing, right on the back of universal credit, we found ourselves in the pandemic too. And so that was about, looking after our vulnerable and our elders as well. And so that the numbers significantly rose then. And so we had to look at how we went about doing things a little bit differently. And so it was about the logistics of keeping food fresh. I'm a firm advocate that, if people are suffering from food poverty, that doesn't mean that we give them substandard food. They deserve the best like everybody else. But the logistics of keeping everything fresh was very challenging. So I started to work with a company that used to cook the meals, restaurant standard meals, and then freeze them. And so how we did it, we deliver on a Monday, 7 lunches and 7 evening meals. And then that would have like whatever, we had on the day. So fresh bread, some desserts, whatever was donated. And it worked really well. And so we did that through the first wave. We rallied really quickly, and my team who came together were wonderful. We rallied quickly and we started to hit the ground running and we started getting those meals out. And so we delivered thousands and thousands of meals. And then the stuff that was excess on any given day, we used to take that into the community centres. And so local community centres like the Methodist and the Unity Centre in Liverpool 8. And, there were some children that were going home and they weren't going home to a hot meal. They might be going home to a piece of toast. They might be going home to nothing. And so we used to drop meals off for the children as well, and they'd have a good meal as well. And all kinds of stuff, a bit of jerk chicken and rice and stuff like that. We had a woman who'd just recovering from brain surgery. She had a brain tumour and she was at home, and she had a son who had special needs. But he was a grown man, he was a young adult. And she couldn't stand at the cooker just to, even boil an egg. She literally was bedbound. And so people like that who were totally dependent on the service. And so we continued it right through the universal credit, the first wave of the pandemic and the second wave of the pandemic. And just today, I've been in West Derby with the Family Support and Food Banks who do a food pantry. And so people are still dependent on food, even today. Yeah. And, it's amazing the way people rally round to look after people who need the help. But the reality is, we should be a just society where government picks up the slack and makes sure that food poverty is not around any longer. Liverpool City Council had chaired the last full council meeting, and we've just become the first right to food city, which is about how we challenge, poverty, food poverty for children and adults in the city.
Hello there, me and Dolly Parton just sat off.
Hello there, just out walking my dogs.
And I just want to say how thrilled I am because there's a show called Your Manchester and it's hosted by the wonderful Belinda and Michelle, and I've been involved with it a few times over the years, and it talks all things Manchester, current affairs. It is a brilliant show.
It's all about the wonderful, the genuine, the beautiful, the talented people of Greater Manchester.
And a show that has become very much part of the fabric of Manchester, made for you. It's dealt with some really important issues over the years.
From thought-provoking to heartbreaking, from bizarre to hilarious. I've had the pleasure and the privilege to be invited as a guest many times, and I love and support Manchester's #1 online magazine show.
And it talks all things Manchester, current affairs. It's brilliant. I've been involved in it over the years a few times, and I love it. I love being on the show.
And I'm very pleased to announce that I have been asked to become a patron for Your Manchester.
And they've asked me to be a patron, and I am absolutely thrilled and delighted.
I'm really excited and honoured to announce that I've been asked to be a patron of Your Manchester. And obviously, as I suffer from FOMO, without any hesitation, I accepted.
Quite clearly #1 for no poverty and #3 for health and well-being. But of course, your gender equality #5 and reducing inequalities #10. So you are, from your mayoral standpoint and your councillor standpoint, working towards those sustainable development goals.
Yeah. I mean, on the equality agenda, I mean, I've always been a fervent, supporter and fighting up for injustice around inequality. And so I work with, right across equality for all. People look at me and go, well, she's a woman of colour, she only deals with race inequality. That's not true. I work with right across the equality groups. And so I've just become the patron for Sea Magic, which is Merseyside and Cheshire, our first reference centre for transgender people, so that they can go and get information, advice and support. And I also sit on the Navajo, which is our LGBT community. I do a lot of work around race inequality. I've just done some work with Liverpool Hope University, introducing a social works programme and a teachers programme for people of colour from our diverse community, and access to social work and teaching, and also working around the infrastructure. Because as we know, we try to advance our communities from the equality groups. Often it's quite an alien environment, and so we have to do something about that environment so that's a welcoming and safe environment for people. And so working with the Hope University and the Vice Chancellor, Gerard Pillay, who's got a real commitment to equality for all, we've managed to look at how we recruit staff as well internally. So looking at, the peer mentors, and looking at education practice educators, and also looking at our tutors, and so that there's more diversity in our universities. And it's also about making sure that that support mechanism is there. We know where the difficulties are, we know where the bottlenecks are, and we need to make sure that we alleviate the majority of the issues so that our students can qualify and go on to find secure employment at the end of it.
I want you to do a 1 minute standalone message, not even 1 minute, but a short message to empower all women of all races for our International Women's Day show.
Right, for all those women out there, just keep doing what we're doing. We're powerful, we're fierce, and we're coming through a pandemic, but we are an integral part of the recovery, whether it's in terms of, caring for, our children and our elders, whether it's about continuing to grow our businesses and adding to the local economy, and just being present and in the moment, being strong role models for our little sisters moving forward. And also, just being there to just keep our fingers on the pulse. There's never a truer saying than the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. If you look around internationally, we've got so many women in leadership positions internationally, and they're all doing a tremendous job. So there we go. We've got some great role models to, live up to. And we're also role models within our own rights. For every powerful woman out there, there's a young sister looking at us and saying, one day I want to be just like her.
Beautiful, beautiful. Right, final question. I love that. Final question. What's next for Anna Rothery?
I don't think it's any secret that I'm actually running for elected mayor of Liverpool at the moment. And
what does that mean for the so break that down for the listeners and viewers?
Yeah. And so the elected mayor is the elected mayor who makes decisions about the city, around policy, around international affairs, around trade and industry, about the growth sector, about employment, about procurement, you name it, and the mayor does that. And so there's an opportunity arisen in the city for a new mayor. So I've been shortlisted along with 2 other candidates, and I am going through the process and enjoying every moment. And so I'm in the middle of a campaign at the moment. And so what's next for me in the future? Hopefully I will be Liverpool's first woman of colour to be an elected mayor in this city.
Can I just say, Lord Mayor of Liverpool, Councillor Anna Rothery, thank you so much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. And, I'm a friend of Liverpool and you're a friend of Manchester. Let's stay connected and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.